Hello, and welcome to the 18th Millennial 2016 Hangout, and this is with Reality Calls. Reality Calls is, well, when did you start your channel?
About over a year ago, just about over a year ago.
Was it? So it wasn't, I wasn't sure if it started early this year or late last year.
I thought it was like mid 2015, something like that.
Right, okay. I'm not sure when I first became aware of it. Of course, it was originally Think Vegan, and then it morphed into Reality Calls. So tell me, it's grown rapidly, and especially recently, since the whole Pizzagate thing erupted. But tell me what why you started the channel.
Well, I actually started because I went vegan and I kind of wanted to promote veganism. So pretty boring.
So it was a sort of single issue thing at that point.
Yeah, that's pretty much where it was. And then it kind of expanded into when I learned about race realism, I wanted to talk about that as well. So, yes.
That must have been quite a departure for. I mean, see, I
Oh,
associate.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, I associate veganism as well, basically as a liberal left sort of thing, stereotypically. So,
Mhm.
well, would you say that perception is accurate, first of all?
It is, unfortunately, in the West at least. So for some reason, a lot of it's funny because in the East, it's the more conservative people, the strict Buddhists, the strict Hindus, the strict religions, who people of various religions who actually are vegan and etc. Vegetarian or whatever for religious reasons. So they're the very conservative ones. They're the ones who are really strict about marriage and all that kind of thing. Whereas in the West, for some reason, vegans tend to be like the social justice warrior, Marxist and everything. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's an extension of that. In the same way that eco-warriorism is an extension of that, which doesn't mean to. I mean, that's not to cast aspersions on those things in themselves. It's just that they seem to be attractive to people who are already against the system. But I mean, that's fine. So what was I going to ask you about? Oh yeah, so when you started branching from veganism into things like race realism, I mean, I wasn't attentive enough at the time to watch how your subscribers reacted to that. How did they react to that?
Well, I think most of them were really pissed off, basically. You get a lot of people saying things like, "You're a vegan. You can't think that." And you're not really vegan if you think that. You know? And it's like, sorry, but being vegan has nothing to do with that. So,
It's quite
yeah.
amusing. It kind of reminds me of the situation in the skeptic community when, as I understand it, Edgy Sphinx converted to the alt-right, so to speak, in the
Oh,
course of doing his channel, and so
yeah.
they all thought that he'd done this, he'd planned this out, and he'd been a plant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people take this stuff very seriously.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so you started the channel, and then it's steadily grew, and then recently it exploded. So you were, and also your style changed. I noticed that.
I have been experimenting, yeah. Yeah, so I guess, I basically report on, I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. I just report on whatever I think is the most important thing at the time to report on. So when I first went vegan, I thought veganism was the most important thing to report on. And then when I found out about race realism, I was like, race realism is the most important thing to report on. And then it was, the election. I was like, the election is the most important thing to report on. And now now obviously we've had the spirit cooking incident. I'm like, oh, this is the most important thing to report on. Then it was Pizzagate is the most important thing to report on. And now I'm kind of, I'm kind of hoping that I can settle down. Hoping, don't get your hopes up though, because I'm not very good at settling on anything. And I'm starting a podcast on Western civilization and how we can fortify it and strengthen it, or if necessary, revitalize it somehow. So, but that's kind of a general theme I have. I mean, I care a lot about truth. I care a lot about Justice as a consequence of truth. I believe that when people have the truth available, we live in a more just world. When certain truths are hidden from us, people just are not able to make the decisions that would lead, ironically, to a fairer outcome. So I'm always sounding like a social justice warrior here, except that social justice warriors already have the end in mind. They know what they want. They want absolute equality for everyone, regardless of what the truth of the situation is. Whereas I want the truth of the situation to be out there so that we can have a fair outcome based on what the truth is, not on some fantasy of equality.
Right. That's a nice summary. So tell me, see, Pizzagate seems to have now morphed into, well, okay, let's talk about Pizzagate first, because in fact, let's talk about the spirit cooking first, because I never quite got to grips with that. So can you explain the whole spirit cooking debacle to people? Now, when did this start as well? Was it was before I went to America. Pizzagate was actually known before I went to America. I know that. So
yeah,
spirit cooking, and that was
well,
at the end of October. So spirit cooking must have been before then.
Yeah. So in the wiki, I'm not very good at remembering dates, but in the WikiLeaks emails, when there was a certain batch released, and someone found that Marina Abramovich, a woman who, by most people's standards, is a satanic witch, but just because of the things she does, writing spells about blood and semen and menstrual blood and painting in blood and drinking blood and eating cakes with bodily fluids in and all that kind of thing, telling people to do horrific things as potions and spells and all this kind of stuff. Now, I don't think there's any way you can really say that she's not a witch, considering that she writes spells like this. I think that's just impossible to argue. I think that's a matter of fact that she is a witch.
If anything fits the definition, it would seem to be that.
Yeah, that is a witch. Anyway, she dresses up in these satanic costumes. She's always using satanic imagery, etc. So I was following this on Twitter. I was digging up my own research as well and sharing it on Twitter. But at the time, I didn't have very many Twitter followers. So I felt like I need to get this out to as many people as possible before the election, because I know that, there are groups of people who are absolutely against Satanism and they are not going to vote for Hillary if they know this. And, this particular election is so important.
Oh, yeah.
We have to do absolutely everything.
Yeah, but what was the connection between this woman and Hillary Clinton?
Thanks. That's an important point there. So yeah, Marina Abramovich, she emailed Tony Podesta, John Podesta's brother, and said, "Hey, do you guys want to come to dinner?" Basically, and she said it in such a casual way. And then Tony Podesta emailed Mary Podesta through John Podesta's email account. Really professional, these guys, national security and all. And said, "So do you guys want to go to Marina Abramovich's spirit cooking dinner?" And, then we found out what spirit cooking consists of, a lot of blood and gore and spells, etc. And it all just all kind of came together that Hillary Clinton's head of campaign, John Podesta, was involved, or at least his brother and himself probably, and his wife were involved in basically the satanic practice. And I thought that was important enough to inform people of. People have a right to know what the politicians are getting up to behind closed doors, I think, if it has to do with Satanism.
Yeah.
So I just collected all the evidence I could, and I called Black Pigeon Speaks, poor Black Pigeon Speaks. I think it was like the middle of the night for him or something. And I was like, "Look, we have to get this information out. It's essential that we get this information out." And he said, "Well, I don't have time to make a video, but if you want to make a video, I'll put it up on my channel so that, as many people as possible can watch it," because he has like a very big channel. I don't know, like 150,000 subscribers or something like that.
Yeah.
So I did that. I just did it as quickly as I could, and basically uploaded it to my channel. He uploaded it to his, and it got a reasonable number of views. A few 100,000, and in total. And I do hope and believe that somehow influenced the election in some, I'm sure that people, once they found out about this, were less likely to vote for Hillary. Anyway, then I did get a lot of subscribers come over from Black Pigeon Speaks because they kind of saw my work and wanted more info on it, and I was posting more info on my channel. And of course, it then kind of evolved into Pizzagate because, well, in the meantime of all of this, people were actually attempting to decode what appeared to be coded messages about pizza and hot dogs and stuff like that. Messages such as, do you think I'd do better playing dominoes on pizza than on pasta? Messages that don't make any sense. So a lot of people, especially on 4chan, were attempting to find out what this meant, and turns out at least some of them had been on the dark web and seen these pedophilia forums where they're constantly talking about cheese pizza, which is a code word for child pornography. And there are many affiliated code words they use, such as hot dogs for young boy prostitutes, chicken, underage boy, stuff like that.
God, it's quite amazing, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
I think a lot of people find the whole Pizzagate thing embarrassing to be associated with because it's so extreme, or even embarrassing to think about because it's so extreme and unusual and strange. But I think this is unfortunate. It makes people uncomfortable, and so they think, okay, I'll just assume that it's a load of nonsense. Excuse me. But actually, my instinct is that there's a lot of truth to this. I mean, we're basically looking at something that is so dark that you can't quite believe it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with everything, really. It's like with race realism. Like, you show people the evidence, they won't believe you. Why? Because they've been told all their lives that that's not true. So it doesn't really matter if you present them with great evidence and extreme logic, they won't believe it. And that's okay. Look, I'm not asking everyone to believe it. I'm just saying, look at the evidence and ask yourself if you want to have one of these politicians in power. I don't. These politicians.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, about what are we achieving by saying things like this? Because as you say, it's not like people are going to go out into the street tomorrow and casually talk about race realism.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of brings it home to me. And for me, it's been more a case of I just want to spread this knowledge so as to legitimize a culture of white solidarity. If we understand that we are different, even behaviorally and genetically from other groups, then the reality of our group becomes more, meaningful. It becomes more consequential. So that's part of why I talk about it, or have talked about it on my channel. I'm guessing with you, though, it was far more immediate because the election was impending at that time.
Yeah, so I was literally just reporting on the data, like on the images as they came out and the information as it came out. So unfortunately, there were a couple of, I guess you could call it like hoaxes that I reported on, like mini little hoaxes, like misunderstandings is probably a better way of putting it. So unfortunately, when you get kind of all caught up in the excitement, you sometimes do, it spreads like wildfire and you end up reporting on a couple of things that aren't quite accurate. So I regret that. But it was kind of the first time I was ever reporting on stuff, and I'm definitely going to be more careful in future. But like 95% of what I've published is accurate, to my knowledge, at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, you make mistakes, you just learn from them.
Look at the New York Times. Like, they've constantly got retractions at the end of every article.
Well, exactly. And of course, that brings us to another thing, which is that Pizzagate has now morphed into the whole fake news phenomenon, which I find very interesting. I find this the most interesting thing of all. Of these three, if you talk about spirit cooking, Pizzagate, and then fake news, I think it's interesting because it's almost like there's a sort of stepping stone here. The fake news is the natural result of the first two things, because they have to create this concept of fake news in order to discredit the reporting of Pizzagate and the spirit cooking stuff.
Thing is, we've had a lot of kind of viral like conspiracy theories go, like for example, Obama's birth certificate, whatever. But they've never called things fake news at this rate, at this amount. Like if you look on Google Trends, it's absolutely unprecedented. It's like you see this vertical line of Pizzagate, and then you like see this vertical line of fake news. So they've never pushed this fake news agenda before.
No, it's a phrase that's just come into the public consciousness in the last month or so.
Yeah. And now I've just actually finished recording a podcast with Andrew Kerr that'll be available in 2 weeks or something. And he's telling me that now they've just pushed through legislation to basically for the government to now fund organizations such as Media Matters to go about collecting fake news stories and giving it to the government to then crack down on. So it's basically
sort of like an internet patrol.
Yeah, they've got like an internet patrol. And the other thing that they're doing is that the government just pushed through legislation that enables them to now fund mainstream media organizations to push the government's agenda or true news, So, yeah, I mean, you laugh at it, but this is creepy as hell. I mean, it's like this is 1984 stuff right here. And it's extraordinarily concerning. And it's just, but then it's just like another one of these things, it's just like, oh yeah, NSA, okay then. Just this creeping totalitarianism. And it's like, no one really seems to care. I mean, Andrew Kerr is just like this independent investigator, just doing this all by himself, funded by donations, and no mainstream media organizations even talking about this.
No, I'm not trying to make light of this.
I know, it's just
it's very, very serious. But what strikes me about this is that they're doing it too late. It's almost like so? Yeah, because at this stage, channels like yours, and if it wasn't yours, if yours got shut down, another one would spring up. This kind of stuff is now out of control, and I don't think they'd have to be deleting YouTube channels every single day in order to suppress these things. So,
well, what they're not actually, I don't think they're actually directly deleting them. I think what they're doing is they're putting people on a list and collecting data about them. And so that's individuals who are pushing fake news. So, for example, me, even though I'm not a US citizen, they would have the right by this law to basically spy on me, basically, because I'm publishing this information. Yeah. But it's kind of like, what's the next step, So they're going to put me on a list and they're going to spy on me. And then what?
Well, I don't know. But what I would say is, if anything happened, anything of the sort of macabre variety, it would be very obvious. It would be glaringly obvious what they'd done. So I think in that sense,
it's kind of creeping. I mean, yeah, the stuff is obvious. I mean, but the thing is, people are accepting it. Like NSA, TSA, they've got everyone walking through naked body scanners now. It starts out like, oh, it's only optional. Oh, we're only putting some particularly suspicious people through. Next thing you know, you have to opt out verbally in order to avoid it. Next thing you know, you're not allowed to opt out.
Yeah.
So that's how it works. And it's like this constant creeping totalitarianism that we've been seeing for the past 30 years, and it's certainly quickening. And that's why it's concerning. It's just, a step, more freedom's gone, Yeah.
Well, one of your videos was taken down, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was taken down by YouTube, which is known to be lobbied by Media Matters, which was founded by the ex-boyfriend of the guy who owned the pizza shop that I was criticizing.
It's amazing, isn't it? That very clear chain of of command. Um,
Yeah, Media
wow.
Matters is pushing the fake news agenda. They basically drip feed to the mainstream media. Media Matters has a huge amount of control over mainstream media organizations. They've got people fired from Fox. They've got people fired from CNN for saying the wrong thing.
Mm.
And this is a George Soros funded organization that is run by a guy who is clearly linked and still does business with Comet Ping Pong.
That is the restaurant at the center of the Pizzagate scandal.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone doesn't know this. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask about related to this is, I mean, it seems to me that we are going to need a platform that guarantees total free speech. And
that would be nice, yeah.
yeah, I think the minds.com website seems to be the obvious thing for that, and also Gab as the equivalent of Twitter. But the other thing is the hosting company. You know, I don't know where these sites are hosted, and if it is some, see, this is what I'm getting at. I think we need some kind of hosting company that guarantees free speech, total free speech for these websites.
Well, at this rate, we're going to need our own internet.
Well, yes. Because we don't know how brutal they could get or how clumsy they could get. You know, people do, and this is a thing, you know, people do just accept what they read and what they see on TV. They just assume, well, the BBC said it, so it must be the truth. Because they don't, again, it's like with race realism, they don't want to contemplate the possibility of a world in which the BBC is actually lying to them every day. Because that's kind of terrifying.
You know, I often talk about my aunt. She's, you know, she qualified top of her year with a law degree or whatever. You know, she's so intelligent, but she won't believe it unless the mainstream media said it. You know, it's like there's literally been times when I've told her something and she won't believe me, and then she comes back with a headline.
Yeah, she'll think you're a kook. I get this stuff as well.
And then she'll come back with a headline like a few months later, and it's like, oh, look what happened. It was in the BBC. It was in the Guardian. It's like, I told you that. But you won't take it from me. You'll take it from some random anonymous person who happens to work for the BBC. Because what? Because...
yeah, it's the authorized voice. It's a sort of they trust them, which of course is what... Well, that's what happens. You know, people will trust you. People will develop that relationship with you through your channel.
Yeah, over time. And, you know, I think that's a good thing about the alternative media is that people don't just go and watch the alternative media and believe every single thing they see in the alternative media because they know it's just some random person making, you know, reporting or whatever, which is a good thing. It's a good thing that they don't believe everything because when they're watching a mainstream media channel, it's like their filter like just turns off, you know. It's like everything must be true because they said it on TV. So that's not good. It stops us from questioning and being critical of, you know, reporting and stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
I get critique all the time, you know, in my comments like, oh, you missed this out. No, you should have said that. And it's like, okay, thank you. I'll remember for the next video.
See, my own, I have doubts about the idea that the majority of the public actually need or want to know the truth. I think it's, I don't know, I have quite an elitist attitude about that because I just don't trust most people or their judgment or their level of curiosity. I think they just want to know, you know, what should I say today? What should I believe today? And that's fine. I think that's just how most people are. It's how the human race is. But of course, that is not at all relevant to those of us who, well, have curiosity. Yeah, I mean, you're like your aunt, for example. She's obviously intelligent, but she doesn't have much curiosity. She's, you know, and I've met many intelligent people who are like that. By the way, they're intelligent, but they just it's amazing how they're very complacent about what they're told. And I think it's not even a matter of intelligence. It's just something in a person's nature. They're either going to be open-minded or not. But anyway, that what I'm getting to is that must not preclude those of us who do have curiosity and who really are interested in the truth from getting it and discussing it as well. This is why hate speech stuff is so annoying to me, because that there are certain things you could say about sub-Saharan Africans which the dementedly incurious person could just hear and interpret as hate speech, but it's not hate. It's scientific data. But so if that's going to be made illegal, then, and also the new laws about anti-Semitism, that shuts down debate quite brutally, and well, then the truth can't be found. It can't be identified. Now, whether the majority of the public need or want to know the truth is kind of irrelevant. Those of us who do should be able to discuss these matters. It's frustrating. And there was something else I was going to say about this. I've forgotten what it was. But what I wanted to get to is because I'm not trying to negate your point at all. I think it is important that we have freedom of speech. But what I wanted to get to was just the way, and I've said this in other Hangouts this Christmas season, the way that the mainstream media has disgraced itself this year. I think it's made a real arse of itself, because just by blatantly lying time and again, it hit one fever pitch with Brexit and then another one altogether of another magnitude with the Trump Hillary election, and then after that this fake news thing is ongoing, and the whole stuff about fear mongering about Russia. I mean, I remember about maybe a year ago now, I was talking to some completely cucked Swedish guy, although I repeat myself, on Facebook, and he was saying that I think I mentioned civil war in Sweden because I'd heard that the army were preparing for that. And I mentioned that to him, and I said, do you really feel safe? Do you really think everything's okay? And he said, that's just Russia trying to create war.
Blame Russia, hey?
Yeah. I mean, and so that was a sort of prototype for what you're seeing now on a much bigger scale, where you can see them trying to engineer a war with Russia. I mean, you can see it happening right in front of you. It's like you can see the puppeteer with the strings. It's eerie.
Oh, it's disgusting. I can't believe you have to put up with this BS. But hey, I mean, this is what we get. I mean, you say that the majority of people don't need to know what the truth is. Well, this is what we get when they don't,
Oh, I know. I just mean that I'm not sure that the majority are capable of this kind of stuff, because they just don't care. But that's a danger in itself. I'm just saying that I think it's a fact of human nature, but it is a danger because, of course, it means that they're liable to be led like sheep. And I've heard my own relatives saying, well, "What about Russia? Russia's baying for blood." Really?
Yeah, I mean, they've obviously not actually gone onto YouTube as I have and gone and watched Putin talking with his translator, because he's there saying, "We don't want war. Please stop doing this shit to us." You know what I mean?
Yeah, that famous clip where he's saying, your politicians say this, and then you go and repeat it to the public, and you don't seem to question it at all. Yeah, it's a very interesting clip.
Yeah,
but I don't know where it's going with that. I think that it seems that Trump is not going to go to war with Russia. I don't think he has any interest in that. If Hillary had won,
Oh yeah, I mean, if Hillary had won, we'd be done for. I don't even know what we'd do. I really don't even know what we'd do if Hillary had won. But yeah, Trump doesn't seem to want World War III, so that's good. He seems to want to be friendly with Putin, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, why not be friends with him instead of trying to start World War III?
Yeah,
it's just so difficult to understand these people's motives. What on earth? Why on earth would anyone on earth want to start World War III? I don't know.
I know.
It's difficult.
I can only guess it's money, money interests, but I wouldn't pretend to know the details. I think that is what animates these things.
Yeah, well, they're freaking psychopaths. I mean,
But it is remarkable to think how different things would be if Hillary had got in. You know, it's just now there are doubts setting in about Donald Trump, but I think we would do well to remember how awful it would be if he hadn't got in.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it. It's just too stressful. And yeah, we're really lucky we have Donald Trump. You know, I just finished listening to his book Art of the Deal, and I thought it was going to be about how to do a deal or something, but it's mainly just kind of like an autobiography. But you know, the things he's done is really impressive. You know, like he was 27 when he first bought and refurbished a hotel. You know what I mean? I don't know any 27-year-olds who've bought and refurbished a hotel. So this guy is like highly competent. Okay, you know,
Yeah.
I know some very rich kids who've been given huge amounts from their parents. None of them have bought and refurbished a hotel. You know what I mean?
Well, I am, on the whole, fairly confident about Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be quite as dramatic as we'd hoped, but I think he is capable, and I think he broadly means what he says. I think he broadly means what he claims to believe.
Well, I mean, even the fact that he says some of these things is refreshing, considering that we've had Obama for 8 years refusing to even say Islamic terrorism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
That
a good
alone.
example of it. You know, that this this artificial reality that they've set up. I mean, you can't even say Islamic terror or
Yeah.
Islamic war.
You can't say anything negative about Muslims whatsoever, or else you're Islamophobic.
Well, yeah, and I mean that did start with George W. Bush. I remember immediately with 9/11 there was this, just as there is now. You know, every time there's an Islamic terror attack, the first thing the politicians say is, this has nothing to do with Islam. And that started, I'm pretty damn sure that started right back in 9/11, almost immediately.
It's
But
like,
of
are they
course,
trying to gaslight us or something?
but it did step up. I mean, political correctness in general, I think, took a quantum leap forward with Barack Obama, because for God's sake, he's half black, and he's not very masculine. Frankly, he looks physically weak. He looks like a coward.
I think his wife lifts more than him. It's never a good
Yeah,
sign.
yeah. I suspect she wears the trousers, but he just, and of course that's another thing. He doesn't have sons, and I think that's. I'm not even saying that that's significant. I'm saying that it looks significant. I'm talking about the sort of image of Barack Obama is of a guy who just should not be a leader or put into a leadership position.
No, I mean, what's his history? Like, he was a community leader, really? That qualifies you
Yeah,
to be president?
a community organizer. But even that, I find it difficult to imagine him organizing anything. I suspect, I don't you? I mean, I suspect that he's just been parachuted into one thing after another.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that he spent $85 million on taking vacations for 8 years
Well,
on
yeah,
taxpayer dime. Just get
yeah,
out.
that's a disgrace. But that's I think. Well, see, the way I would interpret that is that that family don't feel racially at one with the taxpayers who are funding them, and so they they probably think, well, let's just have fun here. I think that.
Yeah, it's sickening. I mean, come on, so these are proclaimed socialists. Like they believe in wealth redistribution, right? So they're taking wealth from their middle class white taxpayers to go on $1 million vacations every 5 minutes. It's evil. It's actually evil. It's
It is.
actually a form of evil. What
Um,
they're doing, it's stealing,
yeah, I know.
and
Well,
it's extremely disrespectful.
yeah. Well, there was a similar thing with Tony Blair and Cherie. What was it they did? There was some they stole a lot of, and Hillary Clinton. Wasn't there a thing where it was revealed that she and Bill had stolen stuff from the White House when they left? I hope I'm not getting mixed up
Yeah,
with
I
something
heard
else.
that as well. I mean, apparently they auctioned off like historical objects from the White House.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I mean, we've seen it in the UK as well, haven't we? We've seen the MPs' expenses scandals,
Yeah, that was a big thing. And that actually
their
came up
second houses and everything.
in
Oh,
the Duck
just
House.
get out. Get
Yeah.
out. Like, these people, the fact that they claim to be these, like, communists and socialists, and all they want is more money for themselves, and they get their power by offering other people's money to poor people. That's how they get it.
Yeah. Well, socialism has tended to be like that. They don't give a shit about the poor.
Yeah.
It's just it's setting one group up against another in order to. It's exactly what liberals now say. Uh, racists do. They'll set the blacks against the whites and all that. But in this case, it's actually an innate thing. If you, in my humble opinion, then the conflict is there immediately. Whereas I think class conflict has to be, to some extent, animated, engineered. But that is the socialist thing. They don't give a shit about the poor. They never have done. And so this is why when like the Blairs live like kings and the Clintons steal stuff, it's very much in keeping with what they've always done and what their thinking has always been and what their feeling for the taxpayer has always been. Now,
Yeah.
these people are scum.
I agree with you. I mean, they are so dishonorable. It's disgusting that we have to have them as leaders.
Well, I'm hoping that Trump will be, better than this kind of thing. I think he will be. I think he. You see, it's interesting with him. He comes from a corporate background in which you, to some extent, do get held to account far more than in the political establishment. So, because you can get fired,
Yeah, I mean, look, we already have him trying to cut costs, which is a great gesture, even if the costs are minor compared to all the other costs. But yeah, the fact that he does that, I mean, in his autobiography, he says things like, "Why would I not save, $2,000 in expenses with a 25-cent phone call?" This is his modus operandi, and this is not how politicians normally act. They waste money left, right, and center, and then up the tax bill.
Yeah, I won't go into that. We do live in a very. See, I think especially with the 2008 expenses scandal, that was a sort of watershed moment because you realised how corrupt, how disingenuous, how avaricious our politicians were. But then it's most of them got off with it. It's not like there was some big purge. There was no purge. I think five of them went to jail, as I recall. But big deal. As I recall, they didn't even serve their whole sentences. So it's bullshit. But that was, I mean, the financial swindling is one thing, but I think it just reflected on the nature of the political establishment itself more broadly. It sort of revealed that we have this elite who are this way, who would do this to us and we know that they would do it because they have done it. And I think then that reflects onto, well, when you see someone like Hillary Clinton, it's in a different country, obviously, but that's what's scary about it. And because you realize it's everywhere, especially and in the EU as well. Someone like Jean-Claude Juncker, I wouldn't trust an inch.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is absolutely a sign of decline. And sorry, I didn't mean to make that rhyme. But when I visited third world countries, decade or so ago, no, not that long ago, I'm not that old, almost a decade ago, I was amazed because the people, when you talked about politics with them, they'd laugh about how corrupt their politicians were. And to me, I thought this was really strange. It's like, wait, you're laughing about it? Like, why aren't you angry about it? Why don't you do something about it? And now what we're seeing is the same thing, in our countries. And I think this is definitely a sign of decline, that people accept corruption. They expect corruption from their politicians. It's just okay. It's just normal. It's just like, yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
And we have such low standards and for our leaders. And what are we going to accept next? That's the problem.
Well, I think people have always, certainly in Britain, they have long had a very dim view of politicians. I think the difference is that, 100 years ago, they could be assured a corrupt politician would be punished, and it did happen. It happened several times. Whereas now, we still accept politicians to be corrupt, and we're correct to do so, but they don't get punished. Because it's so widespread, and their attitude is so casual that no one cares. Which, if it hadn't been for the Telegraph's investigation, that expenses scan. I mean, it only happened because of the Telegraph's investigation. They would still be doing it now otherwise.
Yeah.
And it's exemplified by the fact that they constantly vote themselves pay rises. This kind of stuff, it's just sickening, and it goes on and on. And this is why I think I don't know whether Trump will drain the swamp, but either way, we do need an equivalent of that in Britain. And I would guess probably throughout Europe.
We need a freaking purge. Like, I'd absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, this is why all these politicians, like Obama, he campaigned on change, hope, change, And this is what all the politicians are saying now, because they know people aren't happy. People want change. But they're not, the political class, once they get in, they're not giving it to them. So there's a gap. Okay, there's a gap between what the people want and what the politicians are doing. And that's not going to end in a pretty way unless that gap gets closed, but it doesn't look like it's moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the issue where this really comes to the fore is immigration. People have been voting against that in public polls since it started in the late 40s. It has always been like that. The public don't want it, and they don't want its bastard offspring multiculturalism either. And yet these things are just forced upon us. And if anything illustrates the betrayal of our politicians betraying us, if anything illustrates that, it is that they are literally prepared to replace us and smile smile at us while they're doing so.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I mean. It is just disgusting. That word isn't strong enough. It's infuriating. It's awful.
Yeah, and it's not just in our imagination, it's well documented. We've seen the Immigration Act, but when in the late 50s, I think in the US, people were told, they were constantly reassured, this is not going to change the demographic makeup of the United States. And it's gone from now 90-something% white to 68% white in just a matter of a few short decades. And now it's whites are a minority in schools now across the US. So that's the future, and you can only imagine what the voting outcome is going to be of all these non-whites who we know are constantly voting for Democrats.
Well, they need to go back, one way or another. But I hope that happens with Trump, and I hope it happens with in Europe, because one way or another, I think we need to.
I'm actually talking about the legal immigrants here. I'm not talking about the illegal.
Well, the legal ones as well.
How are they going to go back? How's that going to happen?
God knows. I think we could start by bribing them to do it. But
I like that idea because it's not violent. So
yeah, I know. So do I.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and also we could, I don't know, just ban Islam, make it difficult for them to practice it here. That's certainly what I would do, for sure.
Yeah, but what we would do versus what the political class will do is a very different thing, right?
Oh, of course. That's what's so frustrating about it all. Well, what's so frustrating is that they've set this up in the first place. They've artificially created this titanic conflict, and I don't know how many of them are going to be around to see it.
Oh no. Yeah, these people are just power-hungry psychopaths, and who somehow think that Marxism is virtuous when it always ends in disaster. And we've been conned, we've been lied to, we've been repeatedly conned by these people. Our our parents and our grandparents were conned by these people. If our great grandparents knew how that legislation was going to turn out, they would never have let it pass.
No.
Yeah, so we just I am so angry. I'm not angry at the immigrants. I'm not angry at them. I'm angry at our corrupt politicians and our moronic citizenry who just refuse to educate themselves or care. This is the problem here. And I think that one way or another, something's got to give. This is not sustainable. And I'm not calling for violence, but I am saying that a lot of people are going to suffer in the future as a result of these policies.
Oh, yeah, I think it's inevitable. I mean, I've repeatedly said I'm not calling for violence. I don't condone violence, because you can never say that enough, because certain people are determined to misinterpret you. But nonetheless, I predict violence without a shadow of a doubt. I have done for several years now. I don't think there's going to be a peaceful outcome to all of this. But to try to end on a more optimistic note, what are you going to do with your channel next year? Or do you have any future plans? You mentioned the podcast.
Yeah, so I'm starting a weekly podcast called The Reality Calls Show. And it's all about how we can make Western civilization great again. And I'm having philosophers, scientists, thought leaders on to discuss what we can do, because there's a lot of complaining that goes on in the kind of alt-right sphere and also the adjacent, what would you call it? Thought circles, I suppose.
Contiguous thought spheres.
Yeah. And I really think that we need to get practical and we actually need to take action. We're in a very desperate situation right now. We have the ability to turn things around, but only if we are organized and only if we know what we're doing. So that's why I believe it's important to discuss what we can and should do.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up? I wanted to ask you about Brexit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, tell me your impressions of Brexit.
Oh, it's so predictable, isn't it? These I was going to say politicians, but I think con men is a more accurate term to use, are now trying to get us into a common market with the EU. That's how we got into the EU in the first place.
That's so funny.
No, this is not acceptable. We're not doing that. We want to be entirely sovereign, and we don't want any BS legislation that we're held to, made up by foreign governments and people in foreign countries. I'm just not going with that. So
I actually read today, I read a headline today that if we do stay in the single market, then we're going to get 12 million more immigrants by 2050.
What? How is immigration even linked to this? They're so
deceptive. Because the single market, actually, I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's because the single market, the way they have it in the EU, is that the single market requires free movement of people. So if you, in order to stay in the single market, you have to have free movement.
Right. Okay. So they're basically selling this as like something that's a trade agreement. And then at the same time, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to have a few million extra refugees, by the way. It's like, sorry, piss off, leave us alone, get out. Like, we voted Brexit. That's what we want. End of story. Do it. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Yeah. Actually, that does raise an interesting question. I don't know if you want to answer this, but how would you describe yourself politically?
Oh, well, I don't really know. Like, I'm kind of mixed. Like, on some aspects, I'm extraordinarily traditionalist and conservative, and on other aspects, I'm kind of like central, I guess. And yeah, it's like I'm kind of pragmatic, really. It's like, if something's working, I don't mind. Like, if the NHS was working and it wasn't about to crash and crumble and there weren't 30-day wait times to get a doctor, I'd just be like, yeah, do it. Do it. If it's working, do it. I don't care. But when stuff isn't working, that's when I say, hey, we need to change this. So yeah, I'm more like pragmatic. It's kind of like, I just want to do what works. That's all. and be truthful about what we're doing and why, and inform people and stuff, and not make silly mistakes and have these stupid, inaccurate narratives. And yeah, I'm against meddling in foreign countries and doing foreign wars, and I'm against taxpayers having to pay for foreign aid, because if we want to give charity, we can give charity. We don't need the government to take money off us by force to do so. So yeah, it's pretty simple, really. I just I want to reduce out of wedlock births, for example. I think that would dramatically improve the quality of our civilization. And generally speaking, I would like to dramatically lower taxes as well. I think we shouldn't pay more than 10% income tax and more than 10% sales tax. Currently, you know, if you earn a decent income, you could easily pay 50% income tax and 20% sales tax in the UK, and add in all the other taxes, and it's basically 70% tax. That means you're working for 70% of the year for other people. So what's the point of working? And it's just basically, it's like 70% communism at that point. So I don't want to live in a communist country. You know, if you want to be 10% communist, maybe I can put up with that. But if you want to be 70% communist, nah, we need to change something.
The reason I asked that about your politics is that I was going to subsequently ask you what I'll now ask you. Would you say that the relevant paradigm now is not left versus right, but nationalist versus globalist? Because everything you said there is a clear mix of left and right. I mean, you obviously don't care about, you're obviously not concerned about that distinction, but everything you said was about strengthening the nation. So, you know.
You know, I mean, you know this concept of fractals. Kind of like, if you have a strong cell in your body, and if you have lots of strong cells in your body, you'll have a strong body. If you have lots of strong bodies in your family, you know, and mentally well and physically well and functional, you'll have a strong family. If you have lots of strong families in your community, you'll have a strong community. If you have lots of strong communities in your city, you'll have a strong city. You know, and goes on. And basically, this is how you create a strong country. If you have lots of strong countries in the world, you'll have an amazing world. And that's how I think we should do it. You know, it's like, first of all, you eat good nutrients, look after your cells, you look after yourself, you look after your family, you look after your friends, you look after your city, you look after your country, and you look after the world, in that order. If you try to do it in a different order, you'll end up dead. Because that's when you try to feed other people before you feed yourself.
Right. Okay. That makes very good sense.
I'm glad.
So, okay, to get back to Brexit, was there anything else you wanted to say about that? This is a sort of generic question I've been asking everyone.
No, I'm just pissed off. I'm just pissed off. They lied to us. Now they're trying to swindle us again. You know, it's like, come on, give us a break. We don't trust you. We don't like you. We don't want you to rule us. Get out of here. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fed up. It's like, come on, if you want to, they think we live in some kind of authoritarian state where they get to call the shots. It's like, no, if you're going to say we live in a democracy, then you're going to have to play by those rules. If you want to give us a referendum and ask us to vote, then you're going to have to play by those rules. That's how it works. If you don't want to do that way, then we can do the other way. But tell us what we're doing here, yeah? And this is the thing, like, I just read Vox Day's book, SJWs Always Lie. They always freaking lie. And they're lying to us right now by saying whatever the outcome of the referendum will be respected. And they lie to us. I'm not even surprised, because it happens all the time. And I'm really, really fed up of it, in case you haven't noticed.
No, there's a lot of exasperation and anger in your voice. And I hope that is the fuel for another year of your channel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so long as the mainstream media aren't publishing this stuff, I'm going to have to publish it. That's just how I see it. So I publish because I think it's the right thing to do, and that's all there is to it.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a good place to leave this then. So thank you, Reality Calls, and thank you to everyone for listening. Yeah. Okay. I'll just end it. Okay. Thanks everyone for listening. And next up is the Duke of Durham. See you later.